Welcome everyone to today's webcast, How to Master Resource Management with Microsoft Project Online. My name is Rudy Vandenberg and I'm Manager Implementation Services here in our UMT360 offices in Bellevue, Washington. Before we get underway, I want to touch base on a few housekeeping items. First of all, the audience will be muted throughout the session. If you have a question, you may enter it in the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will also answer all the questions at the end of the session. Furthermore, there will also be an exit survey at the end of the session. It's about 4 questions short, and would very much appreciate your feedback after we've closed out the session. And finally, the session can also be self-reported as a technical session to redeem your PMI professional development units for attendance. So with that, let's get started. During this session today, we'll cover various topics. First of all, we'll briefly look at the objective of resource management. We'll review a couple of more general challenges related to resource management, what organizations are up against. And then the majority of the presentation will actually cover the various tools and techniques that are available to you in Microsoft Project Online, followed by an insightful demonstration and Q&A at the end. So what are we trying to achieve with resource management? Well, here we can see a little bit of a mission statement, probably speaks for itself. We're trying to get the right resources on the right projects at the right time. And obviously, as such, resource management is a key contributor to successful project management. And there's a few dimensions related to it. First of all, in the diagram you see here at the bottom, it's very important to have a good quality of demand in your system to understand what is the demand for resources, what are the resource requirements. Understanding of the needs, there's also the part of supply. That's the middle layer here in the pyramid. Supply is all about trying to understand, well, who are my resources? Are we doing the work internal, external? Who reports to who? Everybody's availability, time zones, and so forth. And last but not least, once you have understanding of your demand and supply, is trying to combine both into assignments or allocation of resources to projects and tasks and so forth. That is, in a few words, simply put, what we're trying to accomplish here within the scope of resource management of this webinar. Now, having said that, we're also typically looking at a number of challenges, I guess, relating to those 3 layers in the diagram: demand, availability, and allocations. We see that organizations oftentimes struggle with various dimensions. First of all, not having good handle of your demand, not having a good list of projects to understand, well, these are the projects and these are the kinds of resources do I need. Typically, we try to recommend organizations to try to form the demand in terms of generic roles such as developers, or testers, analysts, project managers. However, though, you can also actually use real names of people in your pool, whether it be employees or contractors, but at least we need to have a common denominator between, okay, are we doing this by role or by skill or by any other parameter? So understanding, what is our standard list of roles, that's really important. And also kind of relating to product portfolio management, it's also very important to also understand, well, how do we staff projects? It's not uncommon that simply organizations are, taking a project one at a time as they go, maybe staffing products that are maybe not as important, and maybe people should be kept on hold for other products that may start later, but are perhaps more important. And last but not least, lack of consideration for time periods. It's one thing to say, well, gosh, I think I know I need a project manager and a developer, but for how long do you need him? And is it part-time or full-time? So having a place to put all that, that's key. And looking at the middle part of this diagram, the resource availability gap, similar issues. So, okay, once you have your demand in place, and trying to understand, well, what available roles and skills do you have in an organization? Not always you may have all the people that you need. And if you have people, or if you have a need for additional people, sometimes you're limited to either hiring full-timers or contractors, or maybe not at all. So again, depending on your organization, the economy, sometimes you may be constrained in the way of what sort of resources you can allocate to your project or ongoing activities. And with that said, long-term resource planning also really, really important. Very much is based on having a good quality of demand, trying to not only understand, well, what kind of resources I need for so-and-so project, but also try to plan ahead, let's say 3 or 6 or 9 months ahead, to understand, hey, gosh, if I know I need more developers 6 months from now, I can start hiring for people right now, either internal or external, for example. So those are really important parameters to be aware of. And last but not least, looking at the far right of the diagram, looking at the allocation part or the utilization, Sometimes also very difficult to reassign projects or reassign resources on projects. Say you have assigned resources to one project and another more important project comes along, how easy and how quickly can you now move resources over from one project to another? That flexibility sometimes requires approvals, may have to go through some rigid processes, so that's also very, very challenging sometimes in some organizations. And of course, resource leveling, which of course, first of all, requires having a good understanding of your demand and supply and trying to have the ability to start move products around, trying to make sure people are not over-allocated all at the same time, for example. Okay, so these, in a few words, are basically the most common challenges we see when we talk about the objective of resource management. But now, what do we do in Microsoft Project? So we talk about Microsoft Project as different tools or features available inside the platform that allow you to manage your resources more effectively. First of all, we want to make sure we're going to have a central resource pool to which our products are connected so we can leverage resources together and get a good look across all projects, across all work for all of the resources. Having the ability to document high-level resource requirements. So for example, if you're planning out new products that are still in the pipeline that have not been approved yet, trying to understand, well, how many people do I need? In what time periods? Is it by month or by week or maybe by quarter perhaps? You may not even have a detailed schedule just yet, but having the ability to do the high-level planning is also really important, and the platform allows you to do so. And with that, with the current version or with Product Online, we now also have the ability to request resources. That's actually a new function that was introduced earlier this year, did not exist in previous versions, and it allows project managers to collaborate with resource managers online to document a resource contract, an agreement between, okay, I can use this particular person on this project for a certain amount of time. And of course, on the last two bullets here, also very important, you of course have the ability to assign resources to tasks in a schedule. May you get to that level of detail. Some organizations simply don't for very valid reasons. Other organizations, that's all they do. They live and breathe schedules and resource assignments, and we'll demonstrate a few basic steps later on during the demonstration as well. And last but not least, once you have a schedule in place with resources, some organizations have a need to actually update those tasks as they go for a project manager to understand what's done, what's not done, and what is left to do. And this can be done in the context of the timesheets as well. So also here there's another connection point between a project manager and maybe a functional manager who's more focused on understanding and making sure that their team is working, say, 40 hours a week, plus or minus time off or other regional constraints, for example. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to have a couple more slides here to kind of focus and zoom in on some of these topics in greater detail, and then we'll go follow the same structure during the demonstration. So starting back up with the rule again. So within Microsoft Product Online, there is out of the box a standard enterprise resource pool. That basically means if you start adding new products into this system, by default they're all connected to the resource pool, and therefore you can start collaborating, looking at the same resources, as opposed to having 5 projects or 100 projects and everybody writes down John's and Mary's name, and then you have basically duplicate resources. And that's also a key concept, as you can see in the lower half of the slide, the concept of enterprise resources. Those are basically resources that are inside the enterprise resource pool. Now those people can be employees, contractors, whomever you need to have in your pool that you need to collaborate with. Now typically these resources are what we call work resources. That's basically the Microsoft product term for human resources who work on your project. But what we also pointed out earlier on, it's also really important to start thinking through, well, what are roles inside our organization? Are we working with developers, or maybe we talk about senior developers and junior developers? So what you can also add to the enterprise resource pool is what we call generic resources. That allows you to start planning at a high level, understanding by role what are the requirements, without still knowing who exactly is going to do the work. Now, in some organizations, you may already know who the work will perform, and therefore you'll always have the ability to assign named resources may that be necessary. Now, furthermore, there's more detailed resource capabilities available, such as material resources, that allows you to also include costs for materials. Obviously, materials, those are not human beings. They may not have a calendar, they don't have an availability such, but they, let's say, have a per unit rate. Cost resources is another resource type. It allows you to do some high-level budgeting, for example, inside the schedule. Typically, though, we recommend our customers to use UMT360 on top of Microsoft Product Online or Server to start budgeting high-level cost through the web interface, as opposed to through a schedule, for example. Now, without going into more detail here, there's one key point we wanted to make at the bottom of the slide here is that this enterprise resource pool sometimes could be quite a bit of work to maintain, but out of the box with Product Online, you also have an Active Directory sync and to populate and maintain the resource pool automatically based on Active Directory, as well as manage your security. So you can configure that out of the box depending on your needs. Now with that, we also wanted to ask a brief poll to understand, well, how does your organization store its resources? So what we're going to do, we're going to pull up a poll, and give me one brief moment. You should momentarily see the questions appear on your screen, and go ahead and take a few moments and try to answer the right questions. So where do we store our resources? Are we doing it inside each project? Are we doing it in a PPM system, maybe an ERP system? We don't have it documented today, but we still would like to, or we simply don't need a resource pool. That's also a valid answer and sometimes happens in organizations as well. Now, I see that approximately half of us have responded, so let me go ahead, close the survey, and let me share the results back with you. And here we can see the results. So you can see that the vast majority, over a third of our audience right now, they already are using a PPM system. That's great news. That means you already are ahead of the curve. You already have your resources in one place. A fairly large amount, I hadn't expected, about a quarter, is documenting this inside product documentation. Makes perfect sense, but the challenge there is, of course, the ability to collaborate and share. I also see there's a good group of people, equally 22%, that don't have a shared resource pool to set or have it documented in a central place and still would like to endeavor that. So that's certainly very, very good. And also all the way to the bottom, I can see there's a 5% of people saying, well, we don't need a resource pool. And that is nothing bad, because actually some organizations, they focus very much on their product inventory, their financials. They may simply not have a need for resources. So that certainly happens as well. So good feedback right there. Okay, let me go ahead and hide the survey. We'll continue with our slides. On to the next topic. So resource plans and resource requests. So now that we've talked about the resource pool, what could we typically do next? Well, typically if you have a project pipeline by which you capture new ideas or proposals or requests, and the time comes trying to understand, well, what are the kinds of resources do I need? We actually have the ability in Microsoft Product Online to define the high-level resource requirements before you even would create a schedule. That's what we call a resource plan. Now, if you have used the Microsoft platform in the past, or I should say product service specifically, you may have heard about the resource plans before. In the previous versions, that basically was through the web interface, where you have a Excel lookalike view through which you can enter the demand, if you will. Now, going forward, though, there's been a quite significant change in such that the resource plans are now built inside your schedule, and actually I should say your project, because basically your project consists of a project plan, i.e. your schedule, as well as a resource plan. There are two different data entities inside the same project, and that allows you to say, if I have a blank schedule, tasks, I still have the ability to assign resources at the project level and simply start speccing out how many people do I need over time, for example. Now that you can now do through Project Pro for Office 365 or Project Professional 2016. It's similar in terms of its features. But what we now also can do, and that really is what the picture refers to on the side of the slide, is ability to send resource requests to resource managers. And that's a really new, exciting capability that didn't exist before. It allows project managers to get approval from resource managers to work with certain people on the project. This is done at a project level, not task by task, and it basically allows users to document a high-level resource agreement or a contract, if you will, between parentheses, that allows you to later on refer back to the contract and see, well, gosh, now looking at my detailed schedule, are we still within the brackets? Are we over, under, or maybe there was a delay and we need to work with this developer for much more time than we had anticipated, and therefore I may need to submit a new request to keep working with the same person to make sure he or she wasn't assigned to another project in the meantime. Okay, so we'll demonstrate it later on today. That's a really exciting feature. What is really important, though, to point out is that this particular resource request mechanism, also known as resource engagement, it only helps facilitate communication and document agreements It is not a security feature, so with or without this capability, project managers will still have the ability to assign virtually any resource to the project plan or to their schedule and assign tasks as necessary. But of course, we have a reporting capability to allow us to expose this data and make sure there's deviations and basically take action as necessary or bring this up during, let's say, our weekly or monthly status meetings, for example. Okay. Now, also here we would like to ask a poll just to understand, where would you today document high-level resource commitments at all? So also here, let me go ahead and pull up a poll. I'm going to launch it right now. So the slides should be switched over to a blue screen where you can see the questions, and go ahead and answer these questions as good as you can. So option 1 here is, we document high-level agreements in project documentation. Could be an Excel document or maybe a schedule. Some organizations may already be using resource plans, either in a current version or an earlier version. Some organizations use ERP systems like SAP or Oracle, PeopleSoft. Some organizations simply don't document high-level commitments, and other organizations may simply not have a need for documenting commitments at all. Okay. Now here we just got over half the responses, 60%. Let me go ahead and close the survey and share the results back with you. And you will see that the vast majority, over half, documents high-level agreements in product documentations. Makes perfect sense. You typically have a charter or a justification form by which some of these details are already documented. I can also hear the challenge there is that the data may be in an Office document. It's very hard to report upon, very hard to share or modify, for example. Fortunately, though, we can also see there's about a quarter actually using resource plans today, either in Project Online or servers, and that's great news. A small population using ERP systems, and also a fairly large portion of people actually not documenting the high-level commitments at all. And that's really where I guess there is an opportunity to start enhancing the experience to basically make sure we don't run into, I guess, surprises last minute if, let's say, a resource may now be assigned to another project, whereas you were thinking that you may still have to resource. And then last but not least here, there's also 2% of people not having the need to document high-level resource commitments. Good, thank you for the feedback there. Let's go ahead and hide the slide and we'll continue with the next section in our document here. Resource assignments. So this becomes probably familiar to a lot of us. Once you have a high-level resource plan in place, or perhaps not, and you're ready to actually start creating the schedule, let's say your project has been approved for planning, or maybe design, for example, why would you care about resource assignments? Now, I guess first of all, if you associate a name of a person with a task, you provide some responsibility, some visibility and insight across who's responsible for the execution of a task or making sure that work gets done, for example. Now, in the world of Microsoft Project, you can also assign resources to tasks for the purpose of reserving somebody's time. And in previous days, when the resource plans didn't exist just yet, this was really the only way making sure that you actually are blocking off somebody's time on everybody's resource calendar. Now, of course, if you're using resource plans, you typically use that to block off somebody's time. But if you decide not to use resource plans, you can basically use this way to reserve somebody's time as well. And then last but not least, resource assignments in the context of Microsoft Project are typically also required to enable the project team members, basically those people assigned to the tasks, to report progress if there is a need to do so. And that could be done either through timesheets or an online page where I can just enter % complete or hour, for example. Okay. Now, talking about timesheets, there's actually a very fundamental difference here. So within the Microsoft platform, you have the ability not only to submit timesheets, but also just to enter task status. And they really serve two fundamental different purposes. Timesheets typically are used for accounting purposes. So for example, if you need to run invoices or chargebacks or do capitalization, and timesheets typically also include non-product work, maybe ongoing support, time off, and so forth. Now, some organizations don't have a need to do that because maybe they have an accounting system where they do timesheets. However, from a project management perspective, it may still be very relevant to understand, well, what's done and what's not done, what's left to do, and let's reschedule that, or lessons learned or trying to get better at estimating next time. So if timesheets are not the right place for us right now, we can always use task status. It's basically an alternative approach to entering progress without having to worry about making 40 hours a week or reporting your sick time or non-working time. So this is really, really useful for project managers just trying to understand with, let's say, a distributed team across the world. Okay, I need a quick, efficient way to update my schedule, see where we're at, and start rescheduling, for example. And with that said, what the system also allows you to do is use both at once. You can enter task status through a timesheet and also report other time categories, let's say sick time, vacation time, or operating time, for example. That's what we call single entry mode. That's actually a capability that was introduced a couple of versions ago, and a lot of organizations are actually doing that. There's actually few that would use timesheets or task update. Typically, if there's some sort of progress entry, it's the single entry mode, and that's what I'll demonstrate to you later on today as well. And with that, let's move over to our very last poll, just to understand, what methods people are using today to document task progress. So I'm going to open up the very last poll. You'll see the slide switch to the blue screen again, and go ahead and enter your responses. First of all, maybe you're using meetings and phone calls to enter progress. Maybe you're using emails to share Excel worksheets, or maybe a copy of a project plan. Of course, I'm sure some organizations are using timesheets already in any other system, or maybe using other systems for entering task progress, maybe project, maybe other systems, or some organizations may simply not enter task progress at all just yet today, which is also a fair situation. Okay, let me go ahead and close the survey and share the results back with you. And what we're seeing here is that the vast majority uses email, most likely with copies of an Excel workbook or a project plan. You can probably imagine there will be some manual maintenance involved to consolidate all updates into, let's say, your version of the project on the server. Also meetings, phone calls, very popular. Now you can also see that a lot of people are already using an existing system to enter task progress. And it could, for example, be SharePoint. It could be another platform, let's say HP or Adaptive, for example. So that's great that you're already making progress that way. And we can also see a good population using timesheets and a very small group not using task progress today. And also here, we've worked with several organizations, and depending on the level of maturity or what an organization is trying to achieve with their project portfolio management objectives, sometimes there is simply no need to enter progress in the system, and that's absolutely fair. Okay, good. I'll go ahead and hide the survey, and then we're going to jump into the demonstration momentarily. Before we do so, there's actually one technical slide I wanted to share with you. We won't get any more technical than this. For those of you who may not have used Microsoft Project before, we wanted to make sure that some of the terminology is clear. So when we talked about Microsoft Project Online, or sometimes we said Product Server, in today's time, that is basically the online experience versus the on-premises experience, giving you virtually the same functions and features today. Obviously, if you're using Project Online, you receive new features more frequently. If you're using Product Server on premises, it only happens, let's say, once every 3 years that you have a new update or a new release of the product. That is a server component. That's the green box on this slide. Now, there's also two blue boxes here. The one top left is what we call Product Pro for Office 365 or Product Professional 2016. That is what most people know today as just Microsoft Project. It's kind of like an installation on your computer like Excel or Word or PowerPoint. It allows you to create schedules, assign resources, create milestones, and do some of those things on your desktop, and use a fairly advanced scheduling tool right there. Now, what you can also do, a lot of those capabilities are available online using Project Web App. Project Web App is basically your web browser interface into Project Online or server. In fact, most users we work with these days would only use the browser, would only use Project Web App, not only to look at a product or look at resources, but also do basic scheduling, which you can do without the need for Project Pro on the desktop. So again, Project Pro is typically only used for those project managers that have a need for more advanced scheduling capabilities. Let's say if you're working on a large vehicle program and you have, let's say, thousands of tasks to manage, it makes perfect sense to have the desktop version on your computer. Whereas other people may just look at your schedule using the web, and that would work too. So going forward, I'll show you both interfaces, both Project Professional as well as Project Web App. But just bear in mind, they're connected to the same server, the same database, it's the same data, the same permissions. It just looks different from a user interface perspective. Okay. So with that, let me go ahead and share my desktop, and we're going to run through a couple of areas that we've just talked about. But now we're going to see them actually live inside the system, starting with Project Web App. So this is basically our web interface to Microsoft Project. And here, for example, we're looking at the home page. You can see there's the different tiles right here that you can use to navigate through the product. There's also links on the left-hand side, and this is basically based on SharePoint. So if you're using SharePoint today, you're new to product server, you'll see it all looks very similar, and you'll be familiar with it fairly quickly. Now let's go ahead and first of all look at demand, for example. I'm going to go click on projects to see the list of projects in the system. This is what we would call the product center. In this case, what you'll see once my screen refreshes is basically a list of our projects. These projects are organized by workflow phases and stages. So you can see we got a number of products in the initiation gate. Others are what we call in the finishing stage. Some are being selected as we speak. And you can see some information further to the right. Now that's basically where demand comes from. In the context of this demonstration, we're not going to show you how to create a project and those kinds of details. We're going to focus more on the resource side of things. So I'll skip over from the product center into the resource center. And here what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on resources on the left hand side. I'm going to look at the resource center. The resource center is basically access to the resource pool. There is of course security, so not everybody can see all of the resources. And here basically we see what we call the resource center. Now what do we see here? This is basically one central repository for all our people. I can see names of people. I can see the roles these people are performing and see which department they're part of. You know, who's approving your timesheets if you're using timesheets. I have the ability to configure any column that you see here in the system. So if I have different roles or different departments, or I need more columns with more or less attributes about my resources, Microsoft Product Online allows you to configure that through your browser, so you don't need to do any programming. That's pretty easy to set up. And this is basically what we have provided here in a demonstration environment. Now, this is the kind of information you can scroll through either far over to the right, you see there's more columns, or you can simply scroll down and see more resources as you go down. Now, you might notice though that if you look at the data, there are some blanks. For example, I can see that some resources don't have a timesheet manager. In fact, that is because some of the resources are actually not real people. These are placeholders, or what we call generic resources. In fact, we have also a ribbon here that allows us to configure different views. For example, if I just want to see our generic resource to understand what are our common roles in the organization, I can basically apply a view that's filtered differently, and here I see all my generic resources. Now, of course, the resource names, they map to the very same roles, and these are the very same roles that the named resource are organized to as well. But in this case, of course, there is no timesheet manager because these are just placeholders, it's not real people. However, though, what we're doing, we have kept it a blended rate. So once we start forecasting resource demand, we can also start getting an understanding of what's the labor cost of this effort. And furthermore, we also have things like maximum units. This relates to the resource availability, and I'll talk a little more about it later on as well. Because these are not real people, these people don't have availability. However, though, if I were to switch over to another view, let's say to look at our named resources, you'll see that everybody that is a real person also has a role, has a timesheet manager, and here it does have capacity, meaning 100%, meaning full-time. If you have people working half-time, that can certainly be changed. In fact, what you can also see here, people work in different countries and therefore go by different holidays or different corporate holidays. And what you also notice is that you may have different blended rates for external resources, let's say $100 an hour, or maybe internal rates, maybe they default to, let's say, $50 an hour. Now, typically, we use blended rates. That's always very important to be aware of. The actual true rates are typically stored, of course, in an accounting system or an HR system. Now, why do we look at this data? This is actually something that if you're a resource manager, you have the ability to manage right here online. This data may come out of Active Directory. You can certainly also edit this data right here through your browser. So if you're a resource manager with permission to maintain your team, you can do it right here. For example, you can indicate whether these resources are part of a certain department. Let me just get my browser to work. Apologies. My GoToWebinar toolbar was on top of my browser bar. There we go. What we see here, for example, you can see how we have mapped our resources to an actual user account that sits in our Azure environment. What we can also see here, and it's new for existing user product server, we have the ability to indicate which resources require approval to be assigned to a project, and that's where you basically can indicate it. And there's other things like, okay, well, which country does somebody work in? Who's the timesheet manager? What's the resource rate? Is this person working full-time or half-time? And so forth and so forth. This is the kind of data that you can maintain online. Now, some bulk edit capabilities exist online as well, but sometimes it's easier to actually do these resources all at once in a different look and feel. For example, in product professional. So what I'm going to do here, let's say I'm pretending to be a resource manager. What I can do, I can also have a view that shows me my resources based upon a organizational structure that can be configured in the system. And here what I can do, I can, for example, say what I would like to choose all of my resources, and I would like to edit all this data together in one view. So what I can do here, I can open up these resources in Project Pro or Product Professional. It will automatically switch over to the Fed client on my desktop, and it's going to open up the resources. Bear with me for a brief moment. It's taking a few moments here, apparently. Apologies. All right. Well, it took a little bit longer than normal. Apologies for that small delay. That looks like it was a bit of a network hiccup. The key takeaway, what I wanted to show here is once you have those resources online to which only you may have access being a resource manager, you can also edit the same data right here in Product Professional if you have that on your desktop. That's definitely helpful if you've got larger teams. This way you can also start adding your resources, assuming you have the right permissions to do so. And also here you can start filling out different kinds of details about the resource. And there's also a couple of things here that you can't easily do online. So for example, entering the role or department, that's quite easy to do online. What some organizations do, other than say, you know, I've got a resource who's either full-time or
Muted. Unmuted.
okay, let's see if the audio is resolved at this point. Let me check back with our team. Beautiful. Okay, apologies. Probably related to the same network hiccup we just had a brief moment ago. Let's carry on in the interest of time. So we were going back here to talk a little more about how to edit resources and how to also manage capacity, because it's really important. Some organizations settle for full-time or no time, but what you can do in Project Pro as well, you can also start indicating when somebody has joined your organization. So if somebody starts, let's say August 1st, you can actually indicate it right here in the system, and if somebody works part-time, you can do that too. That's a level of granularity you can indicate. You also have the ability to change somebody's working time. If somebody works in a different country, you can indicate it right here. You also have the ability to add, let's say, time off directly here on the calendar. If somebody works, let's say, certain hours or certain days, that can also be adjusted right here through Project Pro. You can also manage cost details in a fairly, low level of granularity. So, for example, if I were to go into our cost section, immediately go ahead and remove this availability piece here. I also have the ability to set different rates. So let's say, year over year, you may actually have different rates. So let's say come January 1st, 2017, we can also indicate that, let's say, our standard rates go up from $50 to $60, for example. So again, this is the kind of detail that you can manage inside the resource pool as necessary. Okay. Now, let's go ahead. Let me go ahead and close this out. I'm going to close my resources here without making any changes. And we're going to talk a little bit about our definition of demand. So I'm going to go back to our browser. I'm going to go back to our project center and open up a project to start defining the resource requirements of a project. So going back into the project center here, I'll see my list of projects, and what I can do next is start opening up a particular project. So for example, I'm going to focus on the first one right here called Application Portfolio Management, and in the browser I have the ability to open up this particular project in Project Professional. That's the place where I can create my resource plan. I always get a warning before I do so. And hopefully here the connection is a little bit quicker. Fantastic it is. And what I see here is a blank screen, a blank project plan, no schedule, no tasks just yet. What's different going forward if there's a new view building in Project Pro for Office 365 or Project Professional 2016 called a resource plan. If I switch to the resource plan, it kind of looks like a Gantt chart, and what I can do here, I can start building out the types of people I need, and I can start requesting the resources right away. Now the first step in doing so is adding the resources to your project and then define the demand. So that's done through the resource ribbon. There's a button called Add Resources, and it allows you to pull a name from the resource pool, which, like we said before, may originally come from Active Directory. And what we're seeing in this dialog box here is two lists. The list on the left, that is our resource pool, to which we have access through a security model. On the right-hand side, that's a list that basically represents the people on my team today. Nobody's assigned just yet. Let's say I'm a developer. Well, I can scroll through this very long list, or I can simply apply a filter that allows me to look for all of the generic resources. I can pick one that I need. Let me click on Add, click on OK, and I've now added a resource onto my project. Now what I can do next, having this resource selected, I can go into a new ribbon called Engagements and create a new engagement. That's basically the request that I'm going to send to the resource manager in a moment. And let's say I need a developer, and let's say it needs to be an expert in .NET, for example. And let's say I need this particular person starting last Monday until, let's say, the end of August, for example. Now I have the ability to indicate whether this person needs to work full-time or part-time. I can also specify the hours within this window within which I need to resource, but I'm just going to leave this person to be full-time for ease of use. And I also have the ability to enter some additional columns that may not be fitting in the descriptions, for example, available to travel. Now once I click on OK, I basically have created this engagement, if you will, or this request. I can right away see the details here on the left, and on the right hand side I can see the data time phase. So going back to this original topic around, well, how do I time phase the data? I know I need a developer, but when do you need one, and by how many hours? It's always a key question. It's of course very important that this activity occurs for all products consistently, but this way at least you can start building out a resource plan, if you will, and you can start adding analysts and product managers and more people as necessary. But at this point in time, the engagement status is called draft. What I now need to do next is submit this to the resource managers. For example, I'm going to just submit the selected engagements. And then on the far bottom right, I can see that the submit was completed successfully. I can now go ahead and close my schedule. I'm going to save and check this back in. Now at this point in time, I was a project manager. I opened up a project, created or started creating a resource plan. In this case, I had requested for a developer for a certain amount of time. Now let's pretend I am a resource manager right now. I'm going to go back to the very same web page of Product Web App. Let me go back to the home page as a starting point. And from here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back into the Resource Center. So I'm going to click on Resources on the far left. I'll pull up my resources again. And let's say I have my view selected that shows all my people by default. Let's say all developers. Now what I can do in the ribbon, I have the ability to look at the resource request. That's a new button that didn't exist in previous versions. It allows a resource manager or a function manager to receive the requests from all of the project managers across all projects. Here I see a very simple view of that. It basically shows me a very short table with all of the resources being requested, with the kind of need that they have and the status of these requests, whether they were committed, proposed, or previously rejected, for example. Now that's a summary view. I have the ability to add time phase data to that by clicking on the ribbon. Basically shows me a slightly different cut of the data. In this case I see the same records, but for each record I see two rows. I can see the proposed work as well as the committed work, depending on the status of the engagement. And furthermore, I can even make the experience a little bit more richer and go into the engagement details, by which I would see still the same set of data, but I now see all of the resources or the products grouped by resource. So I can see Aaron assigned to the Think Nutrition project. I can see that a couple of products are requiring a developer, and as I scroll further down I see more requests on my screen. And on the right hand side you can see all the data time-phased in the very same way this was entered by the project managers in their project plans. Now the one I've just created sits right here. I'll make my screen a little bit larger here. You can see my developer in the application portfolio management project with our description and our hours time phase on the right hand side. So the next step is, well, let's see if somebody's available who could fulfill this request. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on capacity planning, having my team selected, only my team at this point, and I'm going to look at everybody's availability. Now the first thing I see here is yet another brand new screen in Product Align, which we'll call the capacity and the engagement heat map. What we're looking at here is a summary of the resource plans that have been agreed upon. So the data I see here, as you can see, is organized by resource, by project, and the data is time-phased. Now I see colors as well. Now the colors mean different things. If I see blue, that means somebody is either not assigned at all or still has a lot of availability. If somebody is green, that means he or she has the right level of capacity or is within a range of plus or minus 10%. And if you see red cells, that means somebody is more than 10% over-allocated. Now I can also get more details. I can click on any of the numbers. That will give me a little pop-up. It will tell me exactly who we're talking about here. What is this person's capacity in this particular time period? What is a total need and what's a difference? I can also click on the link here, go into more detail to look at a particular engagement for that resource only. So I'm opening up a new tab right here, just zooming in on John only, for example. Now let me go ahead and close it again, go back to the previous view. And what's really important to remind ourselves of, this data is from the resource plans, and this is basically a summary of all our contracts that I had agreed upon with the project managers. So now what I can do next, I can switch views to look for capacity based upon the project plans as well. What is really happening inside each of the schedules? Now this is a view that has been updated from previous versions. It's a bar chart with a table further below with all of the details organized by resource, by project. I can see a legend here where I can quickly turn or remove people as necessary, and you'll see how the chart is automatically updated as I turn things on or off. And if I look for an available resource, I can probably zoom in on Aaron. He's represented by the yellow slices here. He probably has got best capacity, in particular considering our need in July and in August. So having said that, let me work with Aaron, for example. I can go back to the requests, and I can edit the request being a resource manager. So I'm going to go back to the request for the developer on the previous screen. I'm going to select a particular request, and through the ribbon I have the ability to edit it right here through the browser, and I'm going to assign Aaron. I have the ability to reject it, propose different work hours. I can do that too. At this particular point in time, all I want to do is just change this developer resource for Aaron. Click on OK. It's going to update a record here on the screen, and I can now go ahead and click on accept and send this back to the project manager. I can enter comments, click on OK, and I'm done with responding to a resource request. Now, if I were to be a project manager going forward, the project managers, whenever they're going to work with their project plans, and let's say I can open up our application portfolio management project again, will have the ability to see what has just happened. They can open up their project, let's say in Project Pro, and as they open up a project, they're going to be notified through an additional status bar that was introduced as part of this new functionality. So I can right away see here, it says updates, new resources have been committed to your project. I can view the engagement, it will default to my resource plan view, and I can now see how Aaron's been assigned to my project at these particular hours. Now that's my resource plan, I'm good to go. Now I can go into my Gantt chart and start building out the details, may that be necessary. Now it said not everybody may do that, again it depends on organizational need to do so, and let's say these tasks are all starting, let's say by July 18 of the current year, and let's say these tasks are all working out in sequence, and I have the ability to assign Aaron to these tasks and start doing my regular project management work. Now, this of course assumes I'm within the window that I had agreement of. What if I'm expanding to let's say these tasks take a lot of time, and let's say I'm getting beyond August. What happens right now is I'm getting in September, and I can see a new indicator on the left that says, hey, your assignment needs an engagement because there's a conflict between the existing engagement and your actual details. I can right-click, see options, go through a wizard, and resolve this conflict. So it's really important that's a new indicator that product managers can right away see if there is a need for a new resource engagement, for example. For now, I'm going to make sure I'm going to stay within my parameters. I'm going to save the baseline for this particular schedule, and I'm going to publish this data. Publishing basically means I'm going to send these assignments, in this case Aaron, so he can go ahead and start responding to these tasks. Now let's go ahead and do that. I've just saved, published, and closed and check in the project. Let me go back to our browser and let me pretend that I am Aaron. How can we do that? There's a new, or not a new, there's actually an administrative function inside the product that I can use to log on behalf of somebody else. That was actually designed to, let's say, submit or approve somebody's timesheet while somebody is on vacation, particularly these days during summer. That can happen a lot. It's also great for testing or for demonstration purposes like in this case. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to log on as Aaron Painter. And the system will tell me so by showing yellow bar at all times here right at the browser. And in fact, I can see other differences too. If I were to go back to the home page, you'll see that Aaron has fewer links on the left-hand side, only 3 blue boxes as opposed to 4. And he can right away see these tasks assigned. Well, when Aaron clicks on tasks, he would have the ability to see those assignments I've just created. I can see my project right here. I can see task 1, 2, 3 I've just created, and I can see that there's a total of 48 hours of work associated with it. Well, if I would like to report progress, and I'm outside of the world in a different country, I can simply say here, you know what, I've just worked 2 hours in this particular project, started on a day, and I report these hours into the system. What the system will do for us automatically here, it's going to sum all of the hours from the right-hand side, let's say 2 hours Monday, 2 hours on Tuesday. It'll take the sum of 4 hours, put it on the left, deduct it from the total work 16 hours, and the remaining work is 12 hours. And this will now also calculate our percent work complete for this particular assignment. So I have the ability now to send this back to the project manager, so he or she now has the ability to consolidate this very quickly with assignments of all other people at the same time. Now this works great for some organizations who are very focused on project management. Some organizations also have a need for capitalization, chargebacks, invoices, and rather use timesheets. And in fact, you can do something very similar in timesheets. And let's go ahead and look at that one. I'm going to go to timesheets here. I'm going to leave this page without saving. And we're going to look at Aaron's timesheet of the current week. Well, this looks very similar. You'll see once my screen refreshes, I see the same 3 tasks on my timesheet of the same project with the same forecasted hours, and I can do the same thing. I can simply start reporting these hours. Let's say I work full-time as planned on these tasks here all the way through Thursday. I can save my timesheet as I enter my progress, come back another day, for example. And what you'll see also here, these hours are summed up and put on the left-hand side of my timesheet. I can see my actual work, 16 hours, deducted from work, which was also 16 hours remaining work, is now 0. We're 100% complete. If I need more time, I can certainly report it right here by changing remaining work. Now, of course, whenever you save these updates, more remaining work also means you're going to inherently increase the duration, which the system will recalculate for you. And of course, your percent work complete will be adjusted accordingly. So that's actually very similar as I saw on the previous screen. The fundamental difference here is I can also report other time, let's say meeting time, admin time, operational time. This is what we call administrative time. And let's say I was sick on the very last day of the week, let's say Friday the 22nd. I can just enter 8-hour sick time. I can see in the yellow bar that I have now 40 hours on the timesheet. I can go ahead and submit this to my project manager. Now the approval here could be a two-step process. It's actually going to Sarah being, let's say, the functional manager of Aaron, but being Rudy Vandenberg actually was the project manager. So this is something you can configure. You can have one approval or multiple approvers, a fixed approval writing or a flexible one. And basically this way I basically submitted my timesheet. Now let me show you how that is being approved by stop being Aaron Painter. I'm going to be Rudy Vandenberg again. I'm going to click on my admin screen to stop my delegation. And once I've done that, I'm basically back being the project manager. Now, what is a project manager going to do? Well, if the project manager looks at the homepage, they will see they have updates to review. These updates are available right here on approvals. There's 2 pending. We can click on the tile on the homepage or in a link on the left-hand side in the quick launch. That's the same thing. And I can see the updates that were just sent. All of the text that is highlighted in red is what was changed. I can see details to the far left, to the far right. I can even see a preview of these updates to understand what is going to happen to my schedule if I were to approve these updates. It gives me basically a browser view of the schedule before and after the update in a separate window. It always gives you a bit of a warm fuzzy if you were to make sure, okay, is this indeed what I need? If not, I can pick up the phone and discuss. And here you can basically see that task 1 and 2 are updated, and I can see that it caused a delay because the baseline is the gray bar. The blue line is basically what the schedule looked like afterwards. In fact, this is not exactly the baseline. It's basically the schedule the way it is before you're updating your approvals here. Now in this case, if I'm okay, I can go ahead and click and accept inside the ribbon and get the updates in Project Professional. I'll show this to you in a moment. But what happened now with the sick time? Because these were just task 1, task 2. What about the other time? Well, that actually went to Sarah Davis. She can approve some data too here. And in fact, I'll demonstrate it to you in the very same fashion by actually logging on as Sarah for a brief moment. And then we'll close out for Q&A. I'm going to go back to our delegation section. I'm going to choose to log on as Sarah. So I can pretend to be Sarah as part of the demonstration. And Sarah will be a functional manager from Aaron. And what she can do, she can go to her approvals as well, the same way the project manager did. But in this case, because I am a functional manager or a resource manager, I won't see the task updates per se, but I'm caring about the timesheets. Here I see one timesheet, and I can scroll through to see more detail about from whom it is. I can click on the timesheet, and I can see all the exact same hours the way Aaron entered it, both the tasks from the projects, sick time, non-working time, and so forth and so forth. And this data, of course, can also be approved and rejected as necessary. So let me go ahead and approve that, and it completes our cycle. And the last thing I wanted to show as part of the demonstration is what happened with the schedule once a timesheet has been coming through the system. What I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to stop being Sarah for a brief moment. I'm going to be back Rudy on the system, and we're going to go ahead and open up the project in Project Professional. Now, as I have logged on as different people, actually I need to do one small technical step, which is reconnect my Project Pro instance back to the server. I can now go back to the Product Center again and open up the product and see what the updates have done. So I can do it right here. I can see our same product again. I'm going to go ahead and click on the little Gantt chart icon, open this up in Project Pro to basically demonstrate and validate that the same updates I just saw online are now inside my schedule. In fact, I can expose the baseline as well that I had previously set, and you can see the very same picture of what you just saw right here in Project Professional as well. Okay, so that basically concludes the demonstration part of the presentation for today. I wanted to show you one important concept that actually looks very much like a screen we just saw, where we were looking at the resource engagements or the commitments as well. What we can also do with the data in the system is start comparing both the resource plans, the high-level commitments, with the project plans. So having, for example, data in the system by resource by project, we can also offset what was in a resource plan plus what is currently in the project plan, what's in the detailed schedules, and use the very same color coding to indicate whether there's a discrepancy. So this is basically the enterprise view of what a project manager would see in the schedule in case he or she exceeds the agreement that they had previously made with a resource manager. Now, before ending today's webinar, I would like to point you to refer to our website as well, where we have more information not only about resource management, but also about trying to make the organization more strategic when it comes down to product portfolio management, aligning applications, capabilities, and strategies. We've got a Get Started section on the website where you can learn more about next steps and how to contact us. But for now, what I would like to do is spend a few minutes on Q&A before we close it out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up our Q&A manager for a brief moment, try to read through some of the questions. If we have too little time, I'll go ahead and follow up with individuals one-on-one as well. And let me just go ahead and scroll to the top. I can see there were some comments about the audio. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Let me see, let me scroll through here. All right, the first question here. Please differentiate between online and server, locally hosted functions, and if there's a difference. Well, very good questions. First of all, the experience online in the cloud with product online is virtually the same as working with product server on premises. You basically get the same functions and features, except that with online you get features all the time, and on premises only every 3 years. That's the server portion. But when you talk about the desktop interface that connects with the server, and again, it doesn't matter here whether you're doing it online or on premises, the desktop will look the same. Inside the desktop, you'll have many more features to actually build out an advanced schedule with tasks, resource assignments, and milestones and such. That's a key differentiator right there. Another question here is, are the functionality being demonstrated backwards compatible with MS Product 2013? Very good question. So if you're using Product 2013, let's say Product Pro on your desktop, you can connect to Product Online or Product Server 2016. However, though, you cannot benefit of features like the resource engagement and the resource plans because that inherently comes with the server and requires you to have Product Pro for Office 365 or Product Professional 2016. So there is backwards compatibility, except that you won't have the latest, greatest features unless you are up to the latest version. Okay, let me take one more question, and then I would like to close out for our webinar survey. I see some comments about the audio again. Apologies for that. Let me see if I can scroll down to one more question, and if there are any questions, we'll take off offline with all of you individually. Looks like everybody commented on the audio. I apologize for the hiccup there. All right, here's the next question. Why would a platform warn me about risks of opening a project file if the file is in my instance of project created by my colleague? Absolutely, a very good question. That's actually a setting inside the form you can turn on or off. The default is that you always be warned about opening a file, but you have the ability to disable such warnings. Very similar as, for example, you're trusting your domain data. So for example, through your browser, you can trust everything that's on your intranet, or let's say you're using Excel and you can trust macros. Those kinds of settings can be enabled so you don't get the dialog every single time. Okay. Now, in the interest of time, I see we're exactly at the top of the hour. So what I would like to do is end the webinar, and I recognize there are still a few more questions in the queue that we haven't been able to answer just yet. So we will follow up offline with those of you who posted those questions. In addition, all of you will receive an email with a link to the recording to the webinar. And right after closing this session here, there also will be an exit survey. It's only 4 questions short, and we'd very much appreciate your feedback. So thank you so much for attending to this webinar, and looking forward to see you in our next sessions.